Hello and welcome everyone to Madison Alley TV's The Executive Lounge. For today's session, we have Sir Martin Sorrell, founder and executive chairman of S4Capital.
Hello, Michael. How are you?
Terrific, Sir Martin. So great to see you and delighted to have you here. Let's begin with an intro of you, Sir Martin. So as many of our audience knows, you are the founder and executive chairman of S4Capital, which you successfully listed on the London Stock Exchange. For over 30 years, you had founded and led WPP into becoming one of the largest global marketing and advertising companies and holding companies worldwide. You've been ranked as the second best CEO in the world by Harvard Business Review back in 2017, and even nominated as one of Time's 100 most influential people. You've had an extraordinary career.
Amazing what mistakes people make, isn't it?
Well, and most amazingly, you're still at it. And 4 years ago, launched S4Capital, and thrilled to hear where that is today. So thanks for joining us. Right. We have actually a special session today because not only do we have Sir Martin Sorrell, but we will have special guest Brady Brim DeForest, who is the CEO of Theorem One, the latest merger combination with Media.Monks and S4Capital, as well as Olivia Morley from Adweek, which will be joining us today. So we have a very special session. So we'll begin with just an overview of Madison Alley. Most of you know we're a strategic M&A and capital advisory group, specifically focused on digital marketing, media, and advertising, technology, data, and services. We've founded about 20 years ago, so we've been wholly focused in the sector, led by strategic buyers and investors from the leaders in this industry. We're typically raising capital from $10 to $150 million. With M&A transactions between $25 to $500 million. We are reimagining how companies are, the stories that they tell and how they're acquired and sold in this new digital media world, including MadisonAlley.tv, where we have leaders, luminaries, and founders, the likes of Sir Martin Sorrell and others, and also building a global network of distinguished founders, leaders, and luminaries across the marketing and advertising ecosystem through Madison Alley Distinguished Network. So with that, we will jump into our agenda. We will begin, Sir Martin will give us an overview of S4Capital, including a video which the company has shared with us. We'll then talk about many of the acquisitions that S4Capital has made, or the mergers that have combined with the company. Talk specifically about its merger with Jam3 and the success there, and then bring in Brady Brim DeForest to talk about the merger with Theorem One. We'll then hear their thoughts, both Sir Martin and Brady's view on the future and what the future holds for S4Capital. And then Olivia will lead our Q&A. So we're delighted to have an exceptional panel for today's session. So with that, Sir Martin, thanks for sharing this video of S4Capital, bringing us up to date on where the company is, and we'll play the video to give our audience an overview of where you are. Okay, awesome. So here's an overview of S4Capital, and Sir Martin will ask some questions about this. But notably, in only 4 years, you acquired over 25 agencies. Really remarkable. We see your pyramid here, which I'll ask you in just a moment. And also the unitary structure. So there's some really unique features of S4Capital. Perhaps could you talk about your pyramid first, and then we'll get into some other questions.
Sure. Well, I think I was looking at it today. The revised forecasts for GDP growth that you had from the World Bank and others in the last few days. I mean, we've gone down from for 22 from 5 to 6% to under 3% in fairly short order. I mean, it's the last 3 or 4 months. And we've also seen some lowering of the forecasts by analysts and indeed companies about the advertising ecosystem or advertising market. And those are also showing, I'm just looking at the TV now on CNBC, you have Michael Nathanson, who lowered his forecast in the last couple of weeks. So the environment is not a good environment overall. We're going through a perfect storm. Obviously, withdrawal of COVID stimulus, interest rates rising as a result, inflation rising partly because of supply chain discontinuities, but also because of the other issues around the war and the COVID lockdowns in China. That's almost a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And the reason I go through that is that despite that, when you look at and Michael's, your namesake's prognostication for digital this year and the next 4 or 5 years, still remains very strong. So a fundamental founding principle of S4 was that we focus purely on digital because that's where the growth is. So the forecasts for digital growth have gone from about 15 to 20%. I'm talking about globally now, to about 10 to 15, with the US being at the north end. Remember that the digital media market is about 450, or was last year about 450 billion out of about 750 billion, dominated by the 3 big US-based platforms, Alphabet, Meta, and Amazon. They together about 350 billion of the 450, and out of the total of 750. So they're over half. I mean, last year Google was 215, Facebook 115, Amazon 31. So you're talking 60 between the 3 of them, which is over half of the market, and is 3/4 of the digital segment of the market. So that still grows, and that is it's currently around 60% of the media market. It's forecast to grow to about 70% by 24/5. So the first fundamental principle is that we focus on digital because that's where the growth is. And even in difficult times like these, we'll continue. You know, our guidance to the market this year is 25% like for like gross profit, net revenue growth. Last year was about 44%, the year before in COVID 20, and the year before that 40. So these are net revenue gains which still dwarf what we see in analog, or indeed over the overall market, because the overall forecast for the market is about 8 or 9% this year, with digital, as I say, in the 10 to 15% range, and therefore analog, which is a sort of the reciprocal of it, if you like, is going to be up maybe 5% if you're lucky, even in an Olympic year and a midterm, and non-Olympic year, in a World Cup year and a midterm congressional year. So that's number one. Number two, data drives the creation of content and the pumping out of that content through digital media in a continuous loop. So it's not a fixed TV model. We're not producing lavish, expensive TV commercials, which take 2 or 3 months to produce. What we're tending to do is to try and develop insights from data, and creating content using big ideas, but create content that is relevant to consumers at the time they want to purchase, and relevant to their purchase habits, and then monitoring that in a continuous loop. It's rather like an election campaign without an election date. So that's the second. The third is we go to market with agility, because that's the critical corporate attribute. Understanding the digital ecosystem as deeply as possible. The companies that I've mentioned, the platforms, plus Alibaba and Tencent and TikTok, and Apple and Microsoft and Adobe and Oracle and Salesforce and IBM and SAP and Twitter and Snap and Pinterest and LG and Samsung and Netflix and Spotify and Epic, all the Xiaomi, Kaohsiu, the competitor to TikTok itself, obviously with ByteDance, but understanding all those companies, hardware, software companies, and platforms, and the relative merits of each as they ebb and flow, as they inevitably will do. So that's better. And then cheaper or efficiency, particularly important in a market that we're going through at the moment where inflation is so rampant. Clients are going to become increasingly concerned about efficiency. And then the final pillar, the fourth pillar, is around a unitary structure. Easy to talk about, difficult to execute, but we're implementing around that. We structure our transactions on the combination or merger side. We call them mergers deliberately because we are looking for people who want to buy into this philosophy, and our structures are half shares, half cash, and so people have a vital interest in the future value of the firm. So those are the four fundamental principles: free practices, content, which is 50% of the business, data and analytics, which are about 30%, and tech services, of which Theorem One is part, is 10%. We have 9,000 people now in 33 countries. From a geographic point of view, we're currently around 70% in the Americas, about 20% in EMEA and 10% in Asia. I think because of the war, the risk profiles of various regions have shifted. It's risk on for the Americas and risk on for the Middle East and maybe Africa and parts of Asia, but it's risk off for Central and Eastern Europe and maybe EMEA, Europe as a whole. And maybe because of the concerns about what China may or may not do in the context of Taiwan, it's risk off in China. But for Asia as a whole, I think there are significant opportunities, particularly for India, for Vietnam, for Indonesia, Malaysia, and other parts of the region. So I think geographically will remain probably 60-20-20 in the three regions. From a functional point of view, I'd like to leverage up our tech services, and with content perhaps being 50%, data and analytics being 25%, and tech services 25%. As I said before, tech services is currently about 10%. So that's the sort of structure of the group and the objectives.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we'll get into the tech services portion, which and how Theorem One, in addition to Zemoga, contributes to that. Could you also just give an overview of how are you going to market today? You began with MediaMonks as your initial platform. You then acquired Mighty Hive and others. Is there, what brand?
We've done over the last 4 years about 30 transactions. We call them mergers, not acquisitions. They aren't acquisitions because they're structured, as I say, half shares, half cash.
Yep.
We really about half of those companies were around the content pillar. I mean, you're right. We started with MediaMonks in May of 2018, reversed into Deriston, which was a listed company on the London Stock Exchange in September of 18, and then in December of 18 merged with Mighty Hive. And Mighty Hive became the data and analytics and digital media pillar. And we probably, we've done two things in tech services: Zemoga, which was the initial thrust, and then Theorem One,
sure,
which we'll talk about more. But there were probably about 13 or 14 companies, content companies, 13 or 14 data and digital analytics companies that we built into MediaMonks and Mighty Hive, and then merged the two pillars into one, and have now merged, obviously, tech services into the one pillar too. So the branding is around media.monks to indicate the heritage, not just in content, but in data analytics and indeed in tech services, and built that into one unitary approach. It's not as unitary yet as I would like it to be, but it's moving in that direction. And we have to, I think what's happening in the market from a client point of view will force that integration even faster. We managed to do it from a physical point of view because of the impact of COVID on office leases and locations, etc. But there's more work to do on unifying the brand in an effective way. I mean, clients want access to all the talents you have in the easiest way, and therefore having one brand and one organization really is the holy grail.
Mm-hmm. Great. So as you see here, so this is just a few of some of the merged agencies that merged into Media Monks, Mighty Hive, and well, let's say S4Capital. So perhaps you can take us through some of what you believe to be significant milestones in terms of the agencies that merged into you, and the significant impact that it's had on S4Capital.
Well, I think all of them have had their importance in various ways. I mean, it would be Media Monks was core in terms of content. Its origins were in Amsterdam in production, and I think we continue to have to build away from that. I think one of the issues that the legacy Media Monks business is it's still regarded by some as being a sort of production shop, right. Amsterdam-based production shop, which it isn't anymore, and it's outgrown that significantly. I mean, the old Media Monks was probably about, at most, getting on for 800, 900 people, and it's now 9,000 in total. So Media Monks was the core around content. Mighty Hive, similarly, out of San Francisco, was the core around data analytics and digital media. Firewood was a really important deal for Media Monks based in California around the tech companies, particularly around our Whopper clients. Our biggest client is Alphabet. Our second biggest client is not disclosed. It's an NDA, but it's one of the largest tech companies in the world, one of the largest telecommunications tech companies. You can probably guess who it is. The third one is Meta. The fourth one is Mondelez. Fifth, BMW Mini. Sixth is HP. Seventh is another NDA'd FMCG client. And eighth is another NDA'd financial services client. So strong, but Firewood really was, in the context of Alphabet, was important. BizTech around Adobe in Asia Pacific. Circus around social in Latin America, in Los Angeles, and indeed in Spain. Lens 10 in terms of data and analytics. Destined, again, around Salesforce. Zemoga, Theorem 1, around tech services. So each of these, you've picked out here 7 of the 30 or so companies that have joined up, apart from the 2 core ones around Media Monks and Mighty Hive. But each of them had their own important characteristics. I mean, we have our AGM next Thursday, and I was just writing the statement for that, just going through what we've done in the last year since the last AGM, when this time last year we had about 5,500 people, and we're up now to about just under 1,000. And the number of countries, we're with 33 countries. If I should take out Russia, and it's 32 now. But we'll probably not go beyond, I would say, another 4 or 5 countries. You can now hub. There's no need to go to hundreds of countries, literally hundreds of countries anymore, because you can hub because of technology in groups of countries or in regions. But each of those deals, Michael, in their own way, was important. They might be like BizTech or Destined about platforms. They might be like Firewood about tech clients, like Circus about social, Lens 10 about data and analytics, Zemoga and Theorem about tech services. They each had their unique characteristics.
So one of the things you spoke about were your Whopper accounts, which I believe you've characterized as over $20 million of account revenue per year. Why is it important to focus on Whopper accounts, and why is that part of your strategy?
I think it signals acceptance of the model. I mean, the best way of establishing the model is to build deep relationships with clients, and that's what we're trying to do. We call them Whoppers. We've set ourselves an objective of 20 squared, which is 20 times 20. Unashamedly took that from Globant. I think they have a 30 squared objective, or maybe 40 squared objective. So ours is much more modest, but it's a measure of, I think, the scale and depth of our relationships and the traction that we're getting with clients and the model. So this time last year we had 5. Now we have 8. We've identified another 19. We do 3-year plans. I mean, our first 3-year plan was 19 to 21, which called for a doubling of the company organically, which is a 25% organic growth rate, top and bottom line. And we did that 1921, well on the way of doing that for 20 to 22, despite COVID, well on the way for 21 to 3. And our latest plan is 22 to 4. And we've identified 19 clients beyond the 8 that I mentioned, which we think can get to Whopper status. That's that 20 million level over the next 3 years, over 22 to 24. So our objective is to get to that 20 squared objective, certainly by 24. I would say we have the 8. There's another, I would say 3, 4, 5, which are trending towards 20. We tend, about 50% of our revenue base is tech. So, of our top 8 that I mentioned, 5 are tech. And of the other 19 that were identified, 8 are tech. So that's 27. Of that 27, I would say it's about 13 would be tech clients. So we're still very tech focused.
Yeah.
And I think despite, before we just came on, I saw a headline flash, I think it was on Bloomberg, which said, this is the end of the 10-year tech era. Even if headlines are flying around like that, I doubt whether that's true. And certainly the productivity gains and the way of dealing with inflation, really, one of the ways is going to be through greater technological advancement. So we'll continue to be that. And that's one of the reasons why we've fastened in so heavily on tech services. It was a natural extension of our activities to provide a full suite or set of digital marketing transformation services for clients. You have content, you have data and analytics, and you have tech services. And that enables you to reach not just the CMOs and CSOs, chief sales officers or organizations, but the CIOs or the CTOs too.
Sure. So Sir Martin, you've had extraordinary experience throughout the years acquiring and even merging in so many companies. Even at WPP, you were in some years you were one of the most acquisitive companies in the world. And here at S4Capital, you've been building it very successfully through all the companies that you've merged in. What are some of the priorities that you look for as you look at agencies to merge into? What's important to you?
Well, as you know from our interactions with Madison Alley, I mean, there are really sort of 4 areas that we look at. One is top line growth.
Yeah.
The second is margins, EBITDA margins of 20% plus. The third is management ownership. I had a note from somebody today, actually, it's quite funny, saying, could we meet at Cannes because he's considering another process. And I wrote back and said, didn't think there was much point. We don't do process. And it reminded me of, as I was reading his note, it was sardines for buying and selling and not for eating. And I think that's a real problem. So sales growth, really important. We look for at least 20, 25, 30% compound growth. Sure. Margins of 20% plus. Management ownership. I mean, I think that's really critical. The sardines for buying and selling are the ones that are finding their way into PE continuation funds or being passed parcel to parcel from one PE firm to the other. And then I think the fourth element is not susceptible to technological change. Now, we've set up this venture fund with Stanhope, which is one of the institutional investors in S4. And S4S Ventures, as it's called, which is run by Sanya Partalo, is a $100 million fund. We'll probably raise up to 150 eventually. We've done the first close around $100 million. And we're starting to invest in ad tech and martech, actually in early stage technology. And that is not S4's business. S4's business services. And so that fourth point is not being susceptible to technological change. So sales growth margin, management ownership. When I say management ownership, I prefer management control. But when we merged with MediaMonks, Bensis owned 52%, which is a private equity operation in Holland, the old Fortis group, which the management bought out. And Victor Wes and the management owned 48% of MediaMonks. So we're really looking for those four critical factors.
Sure.
And then obviously what's really important is philosophical alignment on that holy trinity, on digital focus, holy trinity, faster, better, cheaper, and unitary structure.
And how do you feel about like client concentration and also relative to whether they have Whopper or not?
I like client concentration. I mean, I don't buy I was speaking to somebody in Switzerland a couple of weeks ago. That's a firm of about the same size as us, slightly smaller actually on the revenue side. He's been at it for a long time, and he proudly said that his biggest client, I think it was about $1 billion of revenue. His biggest client was not more than 4%. There's differences of views on this, but I think, again, going back to one of the questions you asked me, I think proving the model is about building scale.
Sure.
And if you can build scale with a number of clients, I think you get a very solid base. Would I want somebody that was 25, 30%? Maybe not, but certainly 10, 15%.
Sure.
If you have 3 or 4 clients like that, that gives you a really very strong base on which to build. And I like that, if you look at the sector, the advertising and marketing sector, and you look at what areas have grown during COVID in the last few years, it's really been dominated by tech, telecommunications, and healthcare. Media, the media agencies have done well. The healthcare agencies have done well. As the smaller, they're much smaller though. PR agencies have done well, but in the context, of the industry, they're small. They've probably done well because they're an adjunct to social. And to some of the new media, they're not really PR companies. They're sort of small social content agencies, really not focusing in any way on the old style public relations. So I think those are the areas where I'd like to see a bigger healthcare, us with a bigger healthcare portfolio. In telecommunications, we're very strong. We're starting to build a retail portfolio. So we're getting to where we need to be. But tech, I think, will always dominate.
Okay, great. And then you also, you talked about philosophy. So, you say often you're looking for founders that want to buy in, not sell out. You want to talk about that?
And I think that's critically important. I mean, again, it's a bit like that guy who wrote to me today. So he's going through a process. I mean, it's not what we're here for. I mean, we're here to try and build a business over a model that works, that does develop those relationships over a long period of time. It's not here today, gone tomorrow. So we are looking to build something for the long term, which, as I say, I mean, it's very simple. We're trying to go where the growth is. I mean, the holding company their biggest problem. You know, they pat themselves on the back when they do well in 2021.
Yeah.
They forget immediately the travails of 2020.
Yeah.
And then, you know, 2022 is good if they do 4 or 5%.
Yeah, yeah. And just one last thing here. You mentioned that we were talking about the Whopper accounts. So I imagine you typically like companies that have either an alignment with your existing Whopper accounts or the opportunity for you to grow into a new one. Is that right?
Yes, I think we're, you know, given what I said about sort of healthcare,
yeah,
and expanding the client base.
Sure. Okay.
You know, one would be looking, you know, wanting to add, but we like to reinforce what we have. I mean, if I went through our 8 Whoppers, I mean, most of them have been done through what I would call land and expand. You know, with Jam 3, for example, they had a relationship with Meta. Firewood had a relationship with Alphabet, where we picked up revenues, if you like. Our number 2 client, the NDA one, virtually all land and expand. Number 6, HP, all land and expand. So I mean, there's if I went through the top 8, I would say 5 of them are principally through land and expand, 3 of them through pitch, big pitches for us, big pitches. But you know, where you get the strength, and I actually think probably the margin over time is better if you do it through land and expand.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. So let's move on to the next slide. So as you know, we had advised Jam 3 on their merger with MediaMonks. Why was this an important combination for you, and what did it mean? You were talking about Meta before. Yep.
No, I mentioned it. You know, obviously I had a good relationship with Meta and a number of other major tech clients. Obviously started off based in Canada, in Toronto. We just launched our unified office in Toronto a few days ago, and you know, they come together very well, and we're ideal partners for the MediaMonks content operation. I mean, very different to Theorem, because you know that complemented what we had with Zemoga in tech services, but you know, very much the guts of our operation around content. Very strong creative reputation. Very strong, admired not just by, highly admired by the people at MediaMonks and vice versa, and well admired by clients, by people in the industry, by trade journalists, etc. So you know, strong creative culture, strong content capabilities. Fitted very well with MediaMonks, just like Circus or Firewood have done too, or Cashmere. I mean, all good examples of content agencies that shared the same philosophy and bought into the 4 pillars that I mentioned, plus the philosophy of wanting to create a new model and disrupt the old. I mean, there is a you know, running through all of these companies. A bit of the chip on the shoulder, I think, or the burr under the saddle. You know, the bigger agencies have tended to be dismissive of them, and you know, they're out to prove a point or out to prove that they have the required talent to succeed. And there are still out there a large number of similar companies. I mean, by and large. The reasons for doing it, apart from what I've said about the shared philosophy and the 4-point plan or 4 principles, they're looking maybe for capital. Not just capital. I mean, to sell effectively half of the business for cash, it's perfectly respectable, and you sell half and let the other half run. And that's one reason. Second is to find like-minded people. You know, now we have access to 9,000 digital specialists in 33 countries. Then access to geography, as I say, 33 countries where we're well breached, not just in the Americas, but in EMEA and Asia Pacific. And last but not least, access to clients. I mean, we can't guarantee access to clients, but certainly we have ways in which are significant and helpful. So those are the four motivations, I think, around capital, around clients, around people, and around geography.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, the partners at Jam3 were thrilled to join and merge with MediaMonks. They had, tremendous respect, mutual respect for each other. They had a lot of experience at Meta, working together and continue to do so. And I think just, really, we're thrilled to join. And as you said, really bought into being part of, MediaMonks and S4. So for them, all the things that you had mentioned, it was really an ideal strategic home. They got, access to more clients. They recognized that they were working on, some scale, but, S4 and MediaMonks really brought them into a whole another level, global scale, and got to work with like-minded people, similar clients. So, and really be a, creative and content powerhouse along with MediaMonks.
Yeah, and I wouldn't, underestimate the difficulties of doing this, because everybody who starts a business, managed companies are different. Managers who run companies, run them for their own position. They don't run them or to maintain their own positions. I mean, you see this a fair bit with the holding companies. I mean, most of them are, from a market value point of view, are drifting. And are underperforming the indices, and management really is just reinforcing its position. It becomes a sinecure, and there's no real value creation that's being made there. So I think one shouldn't underestimate the difficulties of doing what we're doing, because Jam3, Theorem 1 started from scratch. Relatively new vintages. The reason they've been successful is because they have good people, and those people, believe in their brands and they believe in their philosophies. So you have to, think carefully. That's why we've put a lot of work into the integration process. We start the integration process from the signing of an LOI. As you know, Michael, when you represent, we sign a binding LOI, and we get on with the process of integration, which is not easy, as quickly as we possibly can, because we think it's really important. And that's something with an earn-out structure that sort of gets left for 3, 4, or 5 years, and then often doesn't integrate; it disintegrates.
Yeah, excellent. So, so with that, we'll move on to Theorem 1, which is your latest merger with MediaMonks, and we'll bring on Brady Brim DeForest here, the CEO of Theorem 1, who we were thrilled to have advised on this. So first of all, Brady, thanks so much for joining us here. So Sir Martin, perhaps you can just begin. You've spoken about the development of tech services. That first is Zemoga. And so why was, what did Theorem 1 mean to MediaMonks and Theorem 1? And then, of course, what we'll ask Brady what it meant to him.
Well, I think philosophically we were attuned, and then I think as we went through the pillars, the 4 pillars, that we were attuned as well. Obviously, what we're doing with and Brady hit it off well with DJ and his colleagues at Zemoga. Zemoga is obviously based in Colombia, in about 500 people in Bogota, just opening up they're in Cali, and they're just opening up in Medellin, a new office there. Interesting as we expand. I mean, Duque, who's the president of Colombia, the retiring president of Colombia shortly, put in a program for, I think it was 50,000 software engineers in Colombia alone. So, the personnel, the tech and creative in Buenos Aires, we have 1,000 people. We have 3,400 of 9,000 in South America. The nearshoring, offshoring possibilities through Zemoga can be capitalized by I would say, let's call it the upper funnel approach of Theorem 1. But Brady can go into that. But essentially, I think there was a meeting of the minds. I mean, Brady and his colleagues had other alternatives, and he may or may not be willing to talk about what they were. But I think it was really a philosophical meeting of the minds, and a commitment on our part to build the Theorem One Zemoga technology services part of Media Monks into a much more significant force. I mean, together, we should this year be up to about 10% of our revenues. Our revenues, you see, the market's looking for about $1.2, $1.3 billion of revenue. So we should be in the 120, 130 million tech services revenue area. And Brady and DJ tell me we're going to do that. So I'm assuming it's going to happen.
So Brady, could you, thanks for joining us here. Would love to hear.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So if you could first, tell our audience, what is Theorem One, and then we'll ask, talk more about, why was it meaningful for you to join S4?
Certainly, yeah, and I'll echo Sir Martin's comments. There's a deep philosophical alignment here, and I think that was the piece that really stood out to us. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But to your question, Michael, fundamentally, Theorem helps the enterprise innovate. So we use a combination of people, process, and technology to change the way our clients think about technology and software and products, digital products, as the force that powers the next generation of their businesses. Many of our clients come to us with a deep catalog of legacy technology that is a bit long in the tooth. Platforms that have been running and operating for 20 plus years that don't have a strong emphasis on a compelling and intuitive end user experience. So much of the digital ecosystem is focused on the B2C experience, and we found that the internal users who are actually driving the growth of the business tend to be kind of left behind, and especially as workforces in those legacy environments are aging out. Companies need to be able to attract the next generation of talent. Well, in order to do so, they need to provide experiences that are familiar to digital natives, and that enable them to compete with the Facebooks and the Googles of the world in terms of attracting and retaining talent. I think what's interesting about our business is that we've built a reputation as the go-to organization for very complex challenges that require really the best of breed product managers, designers, and technologists. But it's a full contact sport for us. We don't just ship features against the product roadmap. We help to invent new business lines. We spend a lot of time up front, as Sir Martin said, at kind of the top of the funnel, developing and ideating on business strategy, defining paths towards funding development internally. Most of our client stakeholders come to us with a vision and ambition, but they don't have $20 million to spend over the next 2 years developing a core piece of infrastructure, and they need a partner that actually can help them to build the business case and the funding case, and frankly, develop the social capital internally and the confidence that their organization can compete in this new ecosystem. For us, one of the major challenges that almost all of our clients have is that relationships with our IT organizations have broken down. We sell almost exclusively into the business, but the first relationship that we have to really bring into the fold is with IT, and that's a huge opportunity space that I see for the combination of Theorem One and Zemoga inside of Media Monk's new tech services pillar, is bridging the gap between the B2C and the B2B experience, but also providing a alternative that plays well and augments and makes IT successful, but enables organizations to kind of outpace that rate limiter that frankly exists in many cases. IT organizations are busy keeping the ship running, right? They don't necessarily have, they're not always staffed or designed to drive the next iteration. So a key part of what we have to do is empower them, and a big part of the growth of the future of this pillar, in my opinion, is going to be a heavy transformational kind of oriented consulting that pulls organizations into a more modern way of working.
We've accounted that there's as much of a $1 trillion, if not multi-trillion-dollar opportunity for the likes of the marketing services groups to enter into more strategic digital transformation. And one measure of that is if you add up the top 10 holding companies, they amount to less than $100 billion market cap. And then if you look at any of the global consultancies, the likes of Accenture alone is nearly $200 billion, nearly twice the size of all 10 groups together, combined, all the ad holding companies. And then you have obviously other global consultancies and the entrants from India and other nations.
And you may have EY spinning off their consulting, which would be another in the making.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So while I think initially there was a threat of, the Accentures and Deloittes entering into the marketing service turf, it seems like there's actually a much larger opportunity for you to entrench upon into the global tech services, let alone even as Europe stepping into the strategic services. So could you talk about the magnitude of the opportunity as you guys see it now that you're combined together?
I think from my vantage point, there is a tremendous amount of competition from what I'll call the more traditional kind of IT services organizations that are pushing into content and creative. But I think it's a rough transition. There isn't always an adequate focus on letting the creative force in an organization kind of grow and thrive. And I think what's particularly interesting and compelling to me about the vision of the S4 leadership team is that it's a media and content business that's actually pivoting into technology, and because it started as purely digital, that transition is going to be so much more seamless. If you take a more traditional legacy holding company, moving from an analog world to a digital world is really challenging. Let alone moving from a media services and advertising focus into a technology focus. To the earlier question you asked, I think one of the things that really made a lot of sense to us about S4 was the understanding of the importance of technology. It's not just an enabler for content and media services and advertising. It's actually its own pillar. It's not the engineers in the background building things. It's how can we put the builders and the makers at the tip of the spear, in the next phase of S4's growth. I think it's a really compelling vision, one that we're really excited to have signed up for.
What you say is right, Michael. I think when you look at, my favorite would be Globant. They have, they've sort of invaded the creative space. They bought a company called Habitant in Spain, which we took a look at too, but we thought it was a little bit too traditional for our liking. But it did have a big relationship with BBVA, which is one of Globant's biggest clients, and it made sense from their point of view. And they are trying to, if they come at it from the CIO, CTO side, and we tend to come at it from the CMO, CSO side, there's a meeting of the minds, if you like. If you look at EPAV or Endava or ThoughtWorks or C&IT probably is a little bit more like us, in that Brazilian-based, started more on the marketing and sales side rather than the CIO, CTO side. But ThoughtWorks and C&IT have just gone public. EPAM and Endava have been there for a long period of time. Globant have been there, and then of course the bigger fish is as you mentioned, Accenture. So I do think, and you've seen Accenture wrestling with I thought it was a smart move when they made David Droga the head of it, but it's still of Accenture Interactive, but it's still difficult for them to consolidate and integrate. into one firm. So there's plenty of room to move. But I think for us, I continue to be of the view that an alignment ultimately with the tech end of that spectrum that you referred to, is that it would be a smart move for clients and therefore for ourselves. So I mean, we're only capped at a couple of $1 billion, and Globant, I'm just looking at it now, is about 8.6. The others, it was EPAM that took a big hit because its market cap halved because of its Ukrainian and Central and Eastern European exposure. But Endava is well run, as is CNIT and ThoughtWorks. Proficient is another smaller one.
Sure.
In America. But there are a number of companies that, as you say, that are important, and they're more tech orientated, and I think that's the way the market will move.
Yeah.
I mean, the holding companies would dearly love to get rid of the albatrosses around their neck.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to bring in now, this has been fantastic, Olivia Morley, who's Adweek's senior agency reporter. And Olivia we have some questions for you about the future for S4 and other future technologies. Sure. And other questions that Olivia will lead. Thanks so much for joining us, Olivia. Delighted to have you here.
Of course. Thank you so much for the introduction, Michael, and great to be here. So I'll try and move through these fairly quickly. I'm going to kick off with one of my questions. So Sir Martin, as a journalist, I've been seeing two really big themes in the industry. So the first is big consolidation, with agencies like WPP merging sister agencies to create, for example, VML/Y&R, or most recently Essence Mediacom. And two, we've seen a trend also of marketers consolidating their ad spend with a single partner and moving their media into a single agency. So it seems like all this points to this industry-wide quest for simplicity. So you made WPP into the largest advertising entity in the world, in large part through M&A. Now at S4, you're scaling quickly, just like you did.
When you start with nothing, Olivia, and you want to do it in your lifetime, you have little choice but to do it through M&A. I mean, unless you live for 1,000 years. But anyway, go on. Yeah,
but tell us about the lessons learned over time. Like, how are you approaching the strategy differently now that we're in this new environment?
I disagree with the simplicity. I mean, holding companies have complicated their lives. They've created stronger verticals, and the verticals just don't talk to one another. I mean, they talk about the power of one and unification and one Dentsu and whatever. But the reality, as you well know, because you report it, if you budget as individual brands, the individual brand owners or managers. So you don't are going to run it for their vertical. I mean, may pitch together to win something, but the moment you've won it, there's a mad scramble to accumulate revenue, either for ego reasons or for practical financial reasons, bonuses and things, incentives. So I don't buy that simplification. I think it's made it much more complicated, actually, because the barons or the baronesses have become more powerful, and the center gets weaker. I mean, there's less unification. There's more overhead, certainly at the center, but less unification. On the client side, I don't think I buy that either. I mean, this concept of which when I was at WPP, we pursuing it with teams and consolidation and account consolidation. I'm not sure that that's right. If I think about our top 8 clients, or top 10, if I throw in the other 2 that will make up the top 10, which is one tech and one traditional, their budgets are split, and I see a lot of decoupling of production. I mean, we're involved in the moment of 3 global decoupling production pitches, and that doesn't signal to me simplification. It signifies to me that in a 24/7 always-on world, clients want agility, they want to take back control, and most importantly, they want access to first-party data.
When I say simplicity, though, I mean not having the responsibility of interacting with 10 agency brands under a specific holding company. And so this, I think, relates to your strategy. I mean, you said earlier in the conversation that having one brand is the holy grail, and the other holdcos are trying to do that with, you referenced Power One as an example.
But name one that's done it. I mean, one of Victor Knapp, who's one of the principals at Media Monks, always used to amuse us and himself by taking pictures of the publicist's foyer or reception. It had a phrase "power of one" and then 25 names underneath it. Yeah. So go figure. I mean, it's all very well sitting in Paris or London and pontificating about simplification, but go out into the, and to be fair, it's not easy. I mean, we're trying to do it on a small scale, and it's not easy to do. So I'm not underestimating but don't be overcome by press releases, or I know it gives you, Olivia, good copy for your weekly writings, but don't be kidded by the noise. The reality is very, very different.
I agree, Sir Martin. I agree with you. I think that what they're doing, from my perspective, is they're trying to accomplish this. It doesn't mean that they're successful at it. It doesn't mean that they found the way to do it. You have the advantage of starting a new. You're starting a new
Absolutely.
entity. Yeah.
And in an environment that is growing, because in an environment, to your point, which is not growing, that is growing at 2 or 3% a year on average, it's actually very difficult to do. And I know, because I wrestled with it myself in 2016 and 17.
Right. So the question then is, and you touched on this a little bit, but I'd really like to go deep here. It's like, when you bring in a merger, when you bring in a new brand into the fold, what is the process for integrating them and making them part of Media.Monks as opposed to the brand?
Well, in the conversation, I mean, Brady can attest to this. I mean, right up front, and it is a difficult conversation, Olivia, because what you used to do, or what the holding companies continue to do, is they duck that issue. So if you were the principal of an agency and you were talking to one of the holding companies, they would say, "Oh, look, we'll have an earn out. We'll let you run the business for the next 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. You'll keep your branding. We'll do the financial stuff. You do the professional stuff." And they duck the issue. We don't. We go at it right. I mean, with Theorem One, to be blunt, it's a question of bringing Theorem together with Zemoga and bringing them together with Media Monks. So it's not an easy. And Brady has about 400 people, and Zemoga have 500, so together is about 1,000 people. As I said, combined revenues, let's say around 130 million this year. So it's not, huge scale yet, but growing very rapidly, growing very significantly. And the answer to your question is that we started from the get-go. So when we negotiated with Michael and with Brady, we signed an LOI. Now, because of our accounting delays and Brady's patience and that of his colleagues and his smiley friend, he'll know what I'm talking about, and his smiley friend, that process took a long time. Actually, the best part of that was we had more time to get used to one another, and that was the good news. But the answer to your question is, it starts from the signing of that LOI. So it's about, what systems do we use? What systems do they use? How do we go about, developing client relationships and building those client relationships and mapping it out? So it's very much at the forefront of what we do. And I don't think that any of the, whether it's Jam 3, Theorem 1, or whoever, or all the others that Michael highlighted in the slides, which are probably about a quarter of what we've done, I don't think anybody was under any misapprehension about where we were trying to get to. And having said that, you know, to be blunt and fair, it's not easy because people are very, you know, you start a business in a garage or a basement, you're very attached. You chose the name for a reason and you are very attached to that brand, and that brand, you know, means a lot to your people and it means a lot to your clients, and you don't want to disturb things.
Yeah.
So it's difficult, but you know, the scale of which the holding companies are operating is so big, and the reinforcement of the verticals is so great that it by definition can't work. It just can't work. I mean, it's all very well playing alphabet soup. You know, you sit in the center on the Champs-Elysees and you say, I'm going to merge X with Y. And of course it covers, let's say, 30 or 40 countries. It's a press release. It's a great headline for you and your magazine, and it's a good article. But in reality, the hard work really starts then. I mean, the easy bit is the press release. You know that.
Sorry to have to jump in here because this has been really extraordinary. Unfortunately, we're at the top of the hour here, and we promised our audience an hour. I think we could go on much longer here. I want to, thank the three of you for joining us here. This has certainly been an extraordinary session. Sir Martin, Brady, and Olivia, thanks so much for joining us. Sir Martin, extraordinary insights for sure. And congratulations to your success in building S4. Brady and Sir Martin, congratulations on the what we would consider a landmark transaction and just the beginning of what will become, digital transformation, strategic digital transformation, and really, I think, disruption in the market. And Olivia, again, thanks so much for joining us here.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Brady, as always. Second time this afternoon we've had
Absolutely.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Sir Martin.
We've been doing
the
integration, Olivia. We've been doing the integration.
Keep me updated.
I'll just finish off by letting everyone know that there will be a recorded video that will be available at our site at madisonalley.tv, and I invite everyone to go and watch that. It will be soon available, and to join us for future events here in the Executive Lounge at Madison Alley TV.